Some moments pass by filled with noise and stories that weigh more than they need to. This is 10 Better Minutes, a space where you can hear a few recent real stories that offer a steadier view of the world. It is a podcast that reminds us there is more going on than just the toughest headlines. Over the next several minutes, you will listen to examples of quiet care and careful work that often go unnoticed. We will begin today with a story about how a small greenhouse near a women's prison in Washington State is helping both an endangered butterfly and the women who tend to it. On a cool spring morning in Washington State, a greenhouse near a women's prison hums with quiet purpose. In this rescue and rehabilitation effort, the goal is to save Taylor's checkerspot butterfly, a species that has lost about 97% of its native prairie oak habitat. Without large-scale restoration, the butterfly could disappear for good. At Mission Creek Corrections Center for Women, women are trained as butterfly technicians through the Sustainability in Prisons project, coordinated by Kelly Bush. In January of 2025, Margaret Taggart began her training. Each day, she helps raise eggs and larvae on host plants, often plantain, keeping conditions steady inside the greenhouse at around 60 degrees Fahrenheit with about 50% humidity. The work is careful and practical. It means watching development, supporting caterpillars through their stages, and tracking the details that conservation depends on. Once the butterflies reach the right moment, the program releases them back into restored prairie habitats. So far, the effort has helped raise and release 80,000 caterpillars, turning a fragile future into something living and growing. For Taggart, this is more than a biology lesson. She completed coursework in ecology and lab hours in animal husbandry, and she is considering an associate degree after her release in 11 months. Here, caregiving becomes education, and training becomes a pathway toward belonging, steadiness, and hope that matters. You know that quiet moment when life is moving fast and the big milestones start to feel like the only things worth noticing? Ellie Simmonds invites us to look a little closer at the people who actually make those moments possible. Ellie Simmonds says she needed to slow down and make space for gratitude because achievements can crowd out the everyday support that sits beneath them. At home, she wakes at about 7:15 a.m., makes a coffee, and sometimes heads to Barry's boot camp before breakfast. Even with a routine like that, she remembers there are always lessons to keep practicing, like being on time, learning to say no, and staying optimistic when things do not go exactly as planned. She recently sat in on a panel at Earthfest in London about conservation, climate change, and ocean protection, and it made her think about responsibility and hope beyond her own story. She also backs National Celebration Day, not as a shout, but as a toast to the people who shaped her life. She plans to raise hers to her Auntie Shirley and her grandma, and she holds in her heart the way her parents fostered more than 100 children and then adopted the 5 of them. That kind of love is not background noise. It is a steady rhythm. In the end, the point feels simple and grounding. When we celebrate everyday kindness, we do not just honor the past, we give ourselves a gentler way to move forward. Opening Europe's first large-scale elephant sanctuary in the Alentejo is more than a headline. It is a quiet decision to give real space, real companionship, and real choice back to animals that have been waiting. Pangaea is moving Julie, the last circus elephant in Portugal, and Kariba, a solitary female African elephant in her 40s from a Belgian zoo, into their new home. The sanctuary will begin receiving its first arrivals soon, starting with these 2. Next month, Julie will travel to join Kariba, and both will step into habitat designed for roaming and for meeting other compatible elephants. There is room to bathe, room to wander, and room to form bonds naturally, not on a schedule set by human hands. Pangaea has planned the sanctuary thoughtfully from the start, beginning on about 28 hectares, with expansion across 405 hectares on a former cattle ranch. And the sanctuary will not be open to the public, which means the elephants can stay focused on their own lives. What I find hopeful here is how something can be built to support change, not just to relocate it. When experts prepare the land and the routines, the elephants can finally move through their days with autonomy. It feels like a door opening, slowly and safely, in a place far from old routines, toward companionship and freedom that can grow over time. In a place where confidence can be hard to rebuild, a simple game in Kigali is helping people feel seen, trusted, and connected. Today, we will look at how amputee football is becoming more than sport for Rwanda. Many Rwandans living with limb loss, including survivors of past violence and people injured by accident or illness, carry an extra weight of stigma and social separation. Some people hoped for acceptance, but waited for a space where they could belong without explaining themselves. In Kigali, that space is opening through amputee football training on a pitch, where players move on forearm crutches, and a 7-a-side game makes room for skill, teamwork, and steady courage. Goalkeepers use one arm, children watch from the edge of the field, and practice becomes a daily rehearsal of togetherness. Niraneza Solange lost her leg at age 5 after falling and developing an infection, and she says she does not dwell on not having a leg. On the pitch, she chooses freedom. Louise Kwizera, vice president of the Rwanda Amputee Football Federation, emphasizes trust in people, saying that the sport brings unity when players are supported and safe with one another. Over the past decade, the program has grown, with 5 women's professional teams and 10 teams for men. Now the teams are aiming for the next Women's Amputee Football World Cup expected in Poland or Brazil, with hopes for participation next year. Even as the ministry notes, a formal bid has not yet been made. It is a reminder that belonging is something you can train for, and that confidence can be built one practice at a time. It is not every day that a public health milestone feels quietly personal, but Australia's Trachoma elimination does. It is a reminder that steady care, done with people rather than for people, can change what seemed stubborn for years. Australia became the 30th country to eliminate trachoma as a public health concern, and that result was built through the National Trachoma Management Program, which began in 2006. The program kept working in remote areas because Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities remained at risk where the bacteria persisted. Trachoma can spread through close contact and through contaminated surfaces, and flies can also carry eye and nose discharge. What helped the most was the way the work was organized. Instead of relying on a one-size-fits-all approach, the program used community-level data to guide targeted screening and treatment. Antibiotics were paired with efforts to encourage facial cleanliness, along with practical environmental improvements. When necessary, surgery for trichiasis was available. Just as important, culturally safe care was delivered through Aboriginal community-controlled health organizations, alongside local health workers who understood the rhythm of everyday life. By the end of this sustained effort, Australia was recognized as having brought prevalence down through rural progress, with the hope that prevention can keep holding. The quiet takeaway is that elimination was not a single campaign moment. It was the steady, community-led continuation of care. As always, I have a practical tip for your mental reset and a small invitation to find more steadiness and joy in everyday life. Today, we are talking about how to see setbacks as part of the picture, not the whole picture. When something does not go the way you planned, it is easy for your mind to zoom in until that single moment takes over everything. You start telling a story that this is what you are. This is what will always happen. But setbacks are often data, not a verdict. They are evidence that something needs adjustment, protection, patience, or a new approach. Try this the next time you feel that spiral beginning. Pause for a breath and ask yourself one question. What is true right now, not what is being assumed? Then add one sentence of balance. For example, "This is hard and I am also learning," or "This setback stings, and I have handled difficult things before." You do not have to ignore the pain. You just have to widen your view. Let the setback be a page in your story, not the entire book. And that is our episode of 10 Better Minutes wrapping up for today. If you have been feeling worn down by what is loud and grim, I hope this gave you a steadier kind of comfort, the kind you can carry quietly. Good work is still getting done. People are still showing up for one another in plain, everyday ways, and kindness still has a way of spreading, even when it does not make headlines. If you would like, share a link to a good news story you have come across or a local moment of positivity people might have missed in the comments. I read them, and I love seeing what other listeners are noticing. This is Ian Rhodes with 10 Better Minutes. Take care, and I will see you tomorrow.